I used to believe that my marriage was solid. Unshakable, even. After all, 20 years is no small feat. We had built a life together, shared dreams, raised our daughter, created traditions that felt like second nature. Rachel and I had our ups and downs, but we always managed to find our way back to each other. At least, that's what I thought. The first sign that something was wrong came on our anniversary. Rachel forgot. Completely. Not a card, not a mention, nothing. That had never happened before. I brushed it off at first, convincing myself she was just stressed from work. But the excuses started piling up. She became distant. Distracted. Always glued to her phone, laughing at messages I wasn't allowed to see. At night, she'd sleep with it under her pillow, something she had never done before. When I joked about it, she got defensive, even angry. "You're being paranoid," she said. "It's just work stuff." I wanted to believe her. But deep down, a gnawing feeling told me otherwise. Then there was Carla, one of Rachel's coworkers. We ran into her at a grocery store, and the way she acted was off. She looked like she had seen a ghost, stammering through polite small talk before practically running away. "That was weird," I said. Rachel just shrugged. "She's awkward around people." But I knew better. And then came the late nights. Staff meetings, she claimed. Last-minute projects. I tried to be understanding. Supportive. But it felt like I was losing her, little by little, and she wasn't trying to hold on. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to be the kind of man who snooped through his wife's things, who doubted her every word. But something in me knew, I had to find out the truth. And when I did, it shattered everything. I wasn't looking for proof that night. I wasn't trying to catch her. I just wanted to get home. It had been a long day at work, and I was drained. All I wanted was a hot shower, a cold beer, and maybe a few minutes of peace before Rachel got home from whatever meeting she was at. But fate had other plans. A flat tire. Of all the nights, it had to happen then. I pulled into the nearest convenience store parking lot, cursing under my breath. I wasn't in the mood to wrestle with a spare, but what choice did I have? As I grabbed my phone to call roadside assistance, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Rachel's car. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe she stopped for a drink on her way home. Maybe she was picking up something. Maybe. Then I saw her. She wasn't alone. Rachel stood near the entrance, leaning into a man, laughing, her hand resting on his chest like it belonged there. Like it was second nature. And then, right there under the glow of a flickering streetlight, she kissed him. Not a friendly peck. Not a quick goodbye. A slow, intimate kiss. The kind of kiss that left no room for doubt. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My heart pounded so hard it drowned out everything else. The sounds of the parking lot, the cars passing by, the distant hum of the city, gone. Just silence, thick and suffocating. My mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe it wasn't her. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe. No. It was her. It was my wife, the woman I had spent 2 decades with, the woman I had built a life with. And she was kissing another man like I had never existed. I should have stormed over, confronted them right there. I should have shouted, made a scene, demanded answers. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching the life I knew crumble. I wanted to believe this was a mistake. That she had been caught up in a moment of weakness. But deep down, I knew better. You don't get to that point by accident. You don't laugh like that, touch like that, kiss like that unless you've done it before. Unless it's already too late. Then, as if to hammer the final nail into the coffin, I saw his face. Jerry Garner. I didn't know much about him, but I had heard his name before. A social worker at the psychiatric clinic where Rachel worked. I remembered her mentioning him a few times, but I had never thought anything of it. Now, I wished I had paid more attention. Rage boiled inside me, hot and sharp. But right alongside it was something worse, something colder. A realization. She had been lying to me for God knows how long. She had been sneaking around, covering her tracks, making me feel like a fool while she did this. I clenched my fists, trying to steady myself. My world had just been flipped upside down, but I wasn't going to fall apart. Not yet. I forced myself to look away, to walk back to my car, to take deep breaths that did nothing to ease the fire in my chest. I needed time to think. I needed to figure out my next move. Because one thing was certain, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I barely remember the drive home. My hands were clenched so tightly around the steering wheel that my knuckles turned white. My mind raced, looping the image of Rachel and Jerry over and over again like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my anger had settled into something colder. Sharper. A decision was forming in my mind. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg for explanations. I wasn't going to let her twist the truth. I was going to make her admit it. I sat in the living room, the house eerily quiet. The framed photos on the walls, our wedding picture, family vacations, Christmas mornings, felt like a joke now. A cruel, mocking reminder of the life I thought I had. It was almost midnight when Rachel finally came home. I heard her keys in the lock, the quiet creak of the door as she stepped inside. She didn't expect me to be awake. She didn't expect me to be waiting. She froze when she saw me sitting there. "Hey," she said, hesitating for just a moment before forcing a smile. "You're still up?" I stared at her, my heart pounding. "Where were you?" The smile faltered. Just a flicker, but I caught it. "I told you, we had a meeting." "Don't." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Don't lie to me." She blinked, a flicker of confusion. No, not confusion. Calculation. She was trying to read me. Trying to figure out what I knew. "I'm not lying," she said, but her voice was weaker now. I stood up slowly, never taking my eyes off her. "I saw you, Rachel." Silence. A long, unbearable silence. Her face drained of color. "What are you talking about?" "I saw you," I repeated, my voice shaking with controlled fury. "At the convenience store. With him." For a second, I saw pure panic in her eyes. And then, just as quickly, she masked it. "You're being ridiculous," she scoffed, shaking her head. "Do you hear yourself? You're accusing me of..." "Don't." I took a step closer, and she shrank back. "Don't stand there and insult my intelligence. I saw you with Jerry. I saw you kiss him." She opened her mouth, then closed it. I watched as the wheels turned in her head, scrambling for a way out. A way to twist the story. Then, the worst part. She sighed and crossed her arms. "It's not what you think." I let out a bitter laugh. "Not what I think." "So what, Rachel?" "You just tripped and landed on his lips." Her jaw tightened. "It was a mistake." "A mistake," I repeated, my voice hollow. "That's what you're calling it?" She nodded quickly, like she thought she could still salvage this. "It didn't mean anything. It was a stupid moment. I wasn't thinking clearly. I wanted to believe her. God help me, I wanted to. But I wasn't that naive. If it didn't mean anything, then tell me the truth," I said, my hands shaking. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "Rachel." My voice dropped lower. "How long?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt nothing. No sympathy. No sadness. Just the cold, crushing weight of the truth. 6 months, she finally whispered. 6 months. 6 months of lying. 6 months of sneaking around. 6 months of making me feel like I was crazy for suspecting anything. I took a slow breath, my chest so tight it hurt. And if I hadn't caught you? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Go to bed, Rachel. She looked up, startled. What? Go. To. Bed. My voice was calm. Deadly calm. Because I can't even look at you right now. She hesitated for a second, maybe debating whether to argue, to plead. But something in my face must have told her it was useless. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the bedroom, leaving me standing in the ruins of what we once had. I had my answer. And I knew what I had to do next. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, staring at nothing, my mind replaying every moment of the last 6 months, every lie, every excuse, every night she came home late smelling like a man who wasn't me. By morning, the anger had settled into something else. Resolve. Rachel came into the kitchen, eyes puffy, moving cautiously like she wasn't sure which version of me she'd find. The furious husband. The broken man. She didn't realize yet, there was no fixing this. We need to talk, she murmured. I took a slow sip of my coffee, barely looking at her. No, we don't. She frowned. Oliver, please. I set my cup down and met her eyes, my voice flat. I'm canceling the joint account today. Her breath hitched. What? Why? You know why. I leaned forward. Pack a bag. Get out. Panic flickered across her face. Just like that. Just like that, I confirmed. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. She stared at me, maybe hoping for mercy. But there was none left to give. Finally, she swallowed, nodded, and walked away. The moment the door closed behind her, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't relief. Not yet. But it was the first step toward it. The silence after Rachel left was deafening. For years, our home had been filled with routine sounds, the hum of morning coffee brewing, the low murmur of her voice on work calls, the occasional laughter from our daughter, Sophie, when she wasn't buried in her phone. Now, it felt hollow. Empty. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at the banking app. The joint account needed to go. I wasn't about to let her spend another dime of my money. With a few taps, I transferred my portion into my personal account and revoked her access. Then I checked our credit cards. She had already spent nearly $600 this month, God knows on what. I lowered her limit to the bare minimum. I expected a call or a text the moment she saw what I had done. But my phone stayed silent. Maybe she hadn't checked yet. Maybe she knew it was coming. I wasn't done. I dialed a lawyer. I had no idea what divorce would look like after 20 years, but I wasn't about to let her dictate the terms. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about control, taking back what she had stolen from me. I barely noticed the front door open until I heard footsteps. Dad? Sophie. She stood there, her backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes scanning the room like she could sense something was off. And maybe she could. Hey, kiddo. My voice was rougher than I intended. She set her bag down and frowned. Where's Mom? I swallowed hard. This was the part one had been dreading. She's staying somewhere else for a while, I said carefully. Sophie's face darkened. Because of what she did. My stomach twisted. You know. She nodded slowly, anger flashing in her eyes. I'm not stupid, Dad. I saw the way she acted. And last week, I overheard her on the phone with someone. She didn't know I was listening. I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. I'm sorry, sophomore. Don't be. Her jaw clenched. She did this to herself. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I had expected tears, maybe even denial. But Sophie wasn't a little girl anymore. She saw the truth for what it was. Are you okay? I finally asked. She shrugged. I will be. As long as we're done with her lies. I nodded. Yeah. We're done. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I wasn't in it alone. Rachel didn't call. She didn't text. But I knew it was only a matter of time. By the next afternoon, my phone finally buzzed. I glanced at the screen, her name. I let it ring twice before answering. What do you want, Rachel? My voice was calm, detached. A shaky breath. We need to talk. We did that already. Not like this, she pushed. Not over the phone. Can we meet? I clenched my jaw. Why? Because 20 years can't just end like this, Oliver. Her voice cracked. Please. Just meet me. For a moment, I considered hanging up. But something in me needed to see her one last time, to look her in the eye and make sure she understood that I was done. Fine, I said. 1 hour. At the park near the library. She exhaled, almost in relief. Okay. Thank you. I didn't respond before hanging up. She was already there when I arrived. Sitting on a bench, wringing her hands together. When she saw me, she stood quickly, eyes filled with something desperate. Oliver. I'm not here to fight, I cut in. Say what you need to say. Her lip trembled. I messed up. I know I did. But I love you. I love our family. Can't we? No. My answer was immediate. Her face crumpled. Please, Oliver, we can fix this. It was just a mistake. You don't get to call it that, I snapped. 6 months of sneaking around. Of lying. That's not a mistake, Rachel. That's a choice. A repeated, deliberate choice. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't care. Not anymore. Is there someone else? She whispered. I let out a humorless laugh. Are you serious? She flinched. If there's someone else, just tell me. I shook my head. This isn't about someone else, Rachel. This is about you. About what you did. And about the fact that I'm done. She sobbed into her hands, but I felt nothing. Not anger. Not sadness. Just exhaustion. After a long moment, she wiped her face and looked at me with swollen eyes. So that's it? That's it, I confirmed. She nodded slowly, as if accepting it. But I saw the bitterness behind her tears. Fine, she whispered. If you want to throw away 20 years, that's on you. I let out a slow breath. No, Rachel. You threw it away the moment you chose him over us. I turned and walked away, feeling lighter with every step. She was my past now. And that's exactly where she would stay. The meeting with Rachel didn't leave me feeling relieved. If anything, it confirmed what I already knew, she wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry for getting caught. That night, I sat down with my laptop, going over everything I needed to do. Divorce wasn't just an emotional break. It was a legal battle. And I had no intention of walking away with less than I deserved. First step, securing my finances. I had already cut Rachel off from the joint account and minimized her access to credit. Now, I needed to go deeper. I pulled up my banking history, checking for any strange withdrawals. If she had been spending money on Jerry, I was going to find out. And I did. Dinners. Hotel stays. Even a damn spa day, all charged to our account. My blood boiled, but I forced myself to stay focused. This wasn't about emotions anymore. It was about facts. Next, I contacted my lawyer. A no-nonsense guy named Mark who had been recommended by a friend. "You ready for this?" he asked when I told him everything. "More than ready," I said. "Good. Because she's going to fight back." I knew that. Rachel might have been caught, but she wasn't the type to go down quietly. She'd beg when it suited her, but when that failed, she'd turn nasty. I had seen glimpses of it already. "What about custody?" I asked. "That depends on your daughter," Mark said. "If Sophie wants to stay with you, that gives you a huge advantage." I already knew the answer to that. "Sophie isn't going anywhere," I said firmly. Mark exhaled. "Then we're going for full custody." Hearing it out loud made it feel real. This wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about protecting my future. My daughter's future. And making sure Rachel couldn't take anything more from me. I was done being the fool. Now, it was my turn to take control. I knew Rachel wouldn't go down without a fight. What I didn't expect was how fast she'd strike back. It started with a text. "Rachel, you're really doing this? Lawyers and all." I ignored it. I wasn't playing her games. Then came another. "Rachel, we can still figure this out. You don't have to be cruel." Cruel. That was rich, coming from her. I didn't reply. But I knew silence would only push her to escalate. And I was right. The next morning, Sophie came downstairs with a scowl on her face, phone in hand. "Mom just texted me," she said, holding up the screen. I took the phone and read the message. "Rachel, sweetheart, I know your dad is angry, but we need to talk. He's trying to turn you against me, and that's not fair. You should hear my side of things." I clenched my jaw. Unbelievable. Sophie snatched her phone back. She thinks I don't know the truth. That she can just spin it her way. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. "What do you want to do?" She stared at the message for a long moment before locking her phone. I'm not answering her. A part of me felt guilty. I didn't want to be the reason Sophie lost her relationship with her mother. But Rachel had made this bed, and now she had to lie in it. It didn't end there. By noon, I got a call from my lawyer. "Rachel's lawyer just reached out," Mark said. "She's demanding spousal support." I almost laughed. "You're kidding." "Not at all. She's claiming she gave up career opportunities for the family, that she's financially dependent on you." My grip on the phone tightened. She's had a full-time job for years. And she had enough money for hotel rooms with Jerry. "Doesn't matter," Mark said. "She's going to push for it." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my anger in check. Then we fight back. Because if Rachel thought she could cheat on me, break our family, and still walk away with my money, she was in for a rude awakening. Rachel's demand for spousal support wasn't just insulting, it was war. She wanted me to fund her new life after she torched the one we built together. Over my dead body. I met with Mark the next day to go over our strategy. "She's going to argue that she sacrificed for the marriage," he said, flipping through documents. "We need to prove otherwise." "That won't be hard," I muttered. "She's had a stable job for years. I paid most of the bills. She spent more on herself than the household." Mark nodded. "Good. We'll also highlight her infidelity. Judges don't like awarding support to cheaters, even if the law doesn't technically punish it." I smirked. "I have bank statements. She used our money for her affair." That has to count for something. It definitely does, Mark confirmed. It'll damage her credibility. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. What about custody? That's my priority. Rachel's lawyer hasn't pushed back on that yet, Mark said. But don't be surprised if she suddenly claims you're an unfit parent just to get leverage. My blood ran cold. She wouldn't. Mark gave me a look. She's already trying to take your money. You think she won't use your daughter as a bargaining chip? I clenched my jaw. If she tries that, I won't hold back. Good, Mark said. Because this just turned into a full-scale battle. I walked out of that meeting knowing one thing for sure, Rachel thought she could manipulate the system like she manipulated me. But she underestimated one thing. I wasn't the same man who trusted her. I was the man who was going to make damn sure she faced the consequences. Rachel didn't waste any time. The very next day, I got an email from my lawyer. Subject line, urgent, response from Rachel's attorney. I already knew it wasn't going to be good. I opened the email and skimmed through the attached documents. Rachel wasn't just asking for spousal support, she was now demanding partial custody of Sophie. I gritted my teeth. She didn't even fight for full custody. No, she just wanted equal time with Sophie, probably to make it look good in court. Probably so she could use it to negotiate a better financial settlement. I picked up the phone and called Mark. You saw the email? I asked, skipping any greeting. Yeah, he sighed. I told you she'd pull this. She doesn't even care about custody, I snapped. She's just using it as leverage. Exactly, Mark said. But we have an advantage. Sophie is old enough to have a say. If she refuses to stay with her mother, no judge is going to force her. Then we fight it, I said without hesitation. All of it. No support. No custody. Mark chuckled. That's what I like to hear. I'll file the counterclaim today. Rachel had made her move. Now, it was my turn. I knew Rachel would fight dirty, but even I wasn't prepared for how low she'd go. A week after I filed the counterclaim, Mark called me with news. I could tell from his tone that it wasn't good. She's making accusations, Oliver, he said. She's claiming you've been emotionally manipulative and neglectful toward Sophie. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. Neglectful? I finally managed to say. Are you kidding me? She's the one who's been absent from Sophie's life for months, sneaking around with Jerry. And now she wants to pretend I'm the bad guy. She's trying to build a case that she deserves custody, or at least shared time, so she can push for financial support, Mark said. This isn't about Sophie. It's about money. It's always been about money. I clenched my jaw, gripping the phone tighter. So what do we do? Mark sighed. First, don't panic. This kind of claim is common in divorce cases, especially when one party is desperate. But she has no proof. And we have plenty of people who can back up the truth. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to think. Sophie's on my side. She knows what really happened. Exactly, Mark said. She's old enough for the court to take her preference into account. But we need to make sure Rachel doesn't try to manipulate her. I already knew Rachel had been texting Sophie, trying to get her to meet up, to talk things through. But Sophie wasn't buying it. She had barely responded. Then, as if the universe was trying to prove a point, my phone buzzed. A message from Sophie. Sophie, Dad, Mom just called me. She's crying, saying you're trying to take me away from her. WTF is she talking about? I let out a bitter laugh. Of course. Rachel's favorite tactic, playing the victim. I texted back, ignore her. We'll talk when I get home. Mark hummed on the other end of the line. You know what this means, right? She's losing control, I said. Exactly. And that makes her dangerous. I nodded to myself, a cold determination settling in my chest. Then let's make sure she doesn't get a second chance to screw us over. Rachel wanted a war. She just got one. Rachel's desperation was turning into recklessness. 2 days after she called Sophie crying, she tried calling me. I let it go to voicemail. Whatever she had to say, I didn't need to hear it. But then, she left a message. Oliver, please, can we just talk? This is all getting out of control. I don't want to fight you. I just want what's fair. Fair. That word made my blood boil. What was fair? That she got to cheat, lie, and then walk away with my money? That she got to play the victim while I was left picking up the pieces? No. I deleted the voicemail and moved on. The next morning, Mark called me with an update. We have a court date, he said. 3 weeks from now. I exhaled slowly. That's sooner than I expected. Yeah, Rachel's lawyer pushed for it. She probably thinks a quick ruling will work in her favor. I let out a humorless laugh. She really thinks she can spin this into a win. She's trying, Mark said. She's still holding on to the spousal support demand, but her real focus is custody. She's not taking Sophie, I said firmly. I know. And frankly, the judge is going to see right through this. Sophie is old enough to have a say, and we have solid evidence of Rachel's infidelity, financial irresponsibility, and absence from Sophie's life. She has no real case. But? I prompted, knowing there was always a but. Mark sighed. She could try to make this as messy as possible. Drag it out. Attack your character. She's already made those neglect accusations, and while they're weak, it shows she's willing to lie. I clenched my jaw. Let her try. I'm not backing down. Good, Mark said. Because once we're in that courtroom, we're going for everything. I hung up and sat back, staring at the ceiling. 3 weeks. 3 weeks until I ended this nightmare for good. 3 weeks. That's all that stood between me and the courtroom. Between me and finally cutting Rachel out of my life for good. She must have sensed it too, because the closer we got to the court date, the more desperate her attempts became. First, she showed up at the house. It was late, just after dinner. Sophie was in her room, and I was cleaning up when I heard the knock. Not a light knock, either. A loud, demanding one. I opened the door to see Rachel standing there, looking like a mess. Her eyes were red, hair disheveled, and she had that look on her face, the one she used whenever she wanted to manipulate me into giving her what she wanted. We need to talk, she said. No, we don't. I started closing the door, but she stepped forward, blocking it. Oliver, please, she pleaded. We can't go into court like this. It doesn't have to be like this. I exhaled sharply, keeping my voice steady. Like what, Rachel? Like you trying to take my money and my daughter after you threw our marriage away? No, this is exactly how it has to be. She shook her head, tears slipping down her face. You're angry. I get that. But we had a life together. Doesn't that count for something? I stared at her, feeling nothing. It did, I said simply. And you destroyed it. Her expression twisted, frustration replacing the fake sorrow. You're really going to do this? I folded my arms. You already did. She opened her mouth, probably to launch into some self-pitying rant, but before she could, Sophie's voice cut through the air. What are you doing here? Rachel turned, her face lighting up. Sweetheart. No, Sophie's voice was sharp, unwavering. You don't get to show up here and pretend everything's normal. You lied to me. You lied to Dad. And now you're trying to play the victim. Rachel's face paled. I just want to talk. I don't, Sophie snapped. You don't care about me. You just care about winning. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Rachel swallowed hard, glancing back at me. You did this, she whispered, voice laced with venom. You turned her against me. I almost laughed at how pathetic it was. No, Rachel. You did that all by yourself. For the first time, I saw it, the moment she realized she had lost. Not just in court. Not just financially. She had lost her daughter's respect. Without another word, she turned and walked away. I watched her go, waiting for the usual pang of guilt. The usual flicker of regret. But this time, there was nothing. Just relief. And the certainty that, in 2 weeks, I'd be free. The night before the court date, I barely slept. Not because I was nervous, no, I was ready. But because my mind kept replaying every lie, every betrayal, every manipulative game Rachel had played. This was it. The end of the road. The next morning, I walked into the courtroom with my lawyer at my side. Rachel was already there, sitting across the room with her attorney. She didn't look at me. Instead, she was hunched over, whispering furiously to her lawyer. Sophie sat beside me. She wanted to be here, to make her stance crystal clear. She wasn't a pawn for Rachel to use. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Rachel's lawyer was the first to speak. Predictable. He painted her as a loving mother, a woman who had made a mistake, but still deserved spousal support and shared custody. He claimed I was controlling and vindictive, that I was using financial leverage to punish her. I barely reacted. Let him talk. It wouldn't change the facts. Then it was Mark's turn. And he didn't hold back. Your Honor, let's be clear, this is not about parenting. It's about money. The petitioner, Mrs. Carter, committed adultery for months. She used joint finances to fund that affair. She has a stable career and does not require financial assistance. Furthermore, her daughter has repeatedly stated that she does not wish to live with her mother due to emotional neglect and dishonesty. Mark handed over the evidence. Bank statements. Screenshots of Rachel's hotel bookings. Even Sophie's written testimony. Rachel's face crumbled as the weight of it all crashed down on her. Then the judge turned to Sophie. Miss Carter, I understand you are 17. Do you have anything you would like to say? Sophie stood. Her voice was clear, unwavering. I love my mom, but I don't trust her. She lied to me. She lied to my dad. And now she's trying to act like none of it happened. I don't want to live with her. I don't want to be forced to spend time with her. I want to stay with my dad. Rachel gasped. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. The judge nodded, looking back at the papers. Given the circumstances, and Miss Carter's clear wishes, I see no reason to grant shared custody. Rachel's head snapped up. What? She blurted out. You can't. The judge silenced her with a look. As for spousal support, he continued, Mrs. Carter is financially independent. There is no justification for awarding her any payments from the respondent. Rachel's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. She looked at me, as if expecting me to fight for her. To rescue her. I just stared back, expression blank. This was the moment she realized she had lost everything. The gavel hit. Case closed. It was over. Rachel stormed out of the courtroom without a word. Sophie turned to me and smiled. Let's go home, Dad. And for the first time in a long, long time, I finally felt free. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, peace. No more legal battles. No more lies. No more waiting for the other shoe to drop. Rachel had spent months trying to manipulate, threaten, and guilt-trip her way into winning, but in the end, she had lost everything that mattered. Sophie and I stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, and for the first time, I saw her truly relax. She took a deep breath, as if shedding the weight of her mother's manipulation right there on the courthouse steps. "How do you feel?" I asked. She looked up at me, a small smile playing at her lips. "Free." "Yeah." I knew exactly what she meant. Rachel didn't reach out after the court ruling. No angry messages. No desperate attempts to change my mind. But I knew it wasn't over for her. I heard through mutual friends that Jerry had broken things off. Apparently, he wasn't interested in being with her when she was no longer living comfortably off my money. Without me as her safety net, Rachel had to face the reality of what she had done, alone. I should have felt bad for her. 20 years is a long time to share a life with someone. But I didn't. She made her choices. Now she had to live with them. Sophie blocked her number after one final, half-hearted attempt from Rachel to talk. She had already made up her mind. She didn't want a relationship with a mother who put herself first at every turn. The next few months felt surreal. After living in the chaos of betrayal, divorce, and legal battles, I finally had time to focus on something I had neglected for too long, myself. I reconnected with friends. Started working out again. Even took a weekend trip just because I could. And most importantly, I focused on Sophie. We found a new rhythm, just the two of us. Dinners without tension, conversations without hidden meanings, laughter that didn't feel forced. Then, there was Julie. She had been in the background of my life for a while, Sophie's friend's mom. We had always been friendly, chatting during school events or the occasional pickup. But after the divorce, something changed. It started with a simple invitation. "Hey, if you and Sophie aren't busy this weekend, you should come over for a barbecue," she had said casually one afternoon. At first, I hesitated. Dating wasn't on my radar. But then I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't just kind. She was real. So I said yes. One dinner turned into two. Then coffee. Then long conversations that stretched into the night. Julie wasn't just easy to be around, she understood me. She had been through her own share of struggles, and she never pushed me to move faster than I was ready for. And one night, under the soft glow of her porch light, I kissed her. For the first time in years, it wasn't out of obligation. It wasn't forced. It wasn't something I had to think about. It just felt right. 1 year after the divorce, I looked around and realized I was happy. Not just surviving, not just getting by, truly happy. Rachel was a distant memory, a lesson I had learned and moved on from. She had tried to take everything from me, but in the end, she only freed me from a life I hadn't realized was suffocating me. Sophie was thriving. She was doing better in school, spending more time with friends, laughing more. I knew what that meant. She felt safe. And me? I had Julie. I had my daughter. I had a fresh start. I had everything I needed. And I wouldn't change a damn thing.